Hello, Booktube. Recently, this channel hit 13,000 subscribers. I'm not sure how that happened. I never imagined that such a thing was possible. But as usual, I put out a call for questions for Q&A. You all love them, and I love doing them. And I got a ton of questions, as I always do. So we're going to go through those here with the usual caveats. I will break these up into roughly 30-minute videos so that I don't just go on forever and ever and it takes too long to upload. And I ported all the questions over from the video where I requested them. So it's possible that your question got dropped in that process. If it did, it's nothing personal. Just wait until the next Q&A and ask it again. So we'll start off with Jack Riley Gillick. Congratulations on 13K. Barrage of questions. Number one, inspired by Sorkin's Newsroom, is the USA the greatest country? This is a reference to the mega viral clip from Aaron Sorkin's TV show, The Newsroom, which you can easily find on YouTube. And in that clip, the show's main character breaks down a whole bunch of analytical, statistical ways in which America is not the greatest country in the world, not even close. And very few of those statistics are completely accurate, but none of them is completely wrong. So, on one level, measured objectively, materially, no. But it's my country, which makes it, in the second part of that mega viral clip, the main character on the show then lapses into incredibly treacly cliches about the good old days of America that Aaron Sorkin has to know never existed, and I know they never existed, but the one thing that main character never does in the course of that mega viral soliloquy is say that he loves it anyway, and I do. So it's the greatest country for me. But there's an indefinable aspect there that, of course, you would feel about your own country. I would define it, I would at least term it as patriotism, but that has been totally co-opted in the 21st century and is a toxic term, so I don't know what I would say. Your second question is your thoughts on the Longmire novels of Craig Johnson. I love them. They're fantastic. And what's the best book on the 2020 election so far? I have not read a book on the 2020 election so far that's even good, much less great. And there's quite a bit about the 2020 election that we don't know, I would imagine. There's quite a bit about the 2016 election that we don't know, so I'm guessing the same is true of the 2020 election. I'll just have to wait. I'm assuming that a great book will come along. Secular Perspective has a gigantic block of text, so much for my call for the text to be brief. In a previous Q&A, I made the mistake of asking if you've read anything by Knut Hamsun, but this time around I will ask two questions concerning Knut Hamsun that are more to your liking. Number one, in numerous videos you've made showing books purchased at the Brattle sometimes features volumes of letter correspondences. I want to know what you think of Hamsun as a person after reading his letters. I don't think I've ever read a collection of his letters. Are there Knut Hamsun correspondence collections that are in English? And number two, a question that naturally arises when talking about my major author is which book in his or her bibliography you like the most. Regarding Hamsun, which most people cite Hunger or Growth of the Soil, but apart from these, which other works of Hamsun managed to captivate you? I don't know this author well enough. I don't think I know this author well enough to go much beyond Hunger. It sounds like you know the author a lot better than I do. I don't have a favorite of other works. Balin 321 has a gigantic block of prose. Let's see here. Number one, since I've started reading voraciously, inspired by both you and COVID, I have the nagging feeling that my education in a first world country has not been that good. Even after finishing my university degree in history, I have the feeling that I am the lesser son of greater sires. The linguistic and historical background needed to understand literature often exceeds my own. Educated men in the past always seem so erudite, yet I don't see this in myself or my peers. How do I deal with this? Will I simply have to write off my education and start again, or is there something else to do? Well, a large part of this depends on when you had your education. Used to, once upon a time, for decades, centuries. it depended on where you got your education. Now it depends entirely on when you got your education. If you got your higher education, I would say from 2014, between 2014 and now, if you got it anytime in the recent past, then it's probably worthless, and you certainly overpaid for it. I wouldn't say junk it completely. Keep in mind, the men of ages past seem so erudite because the only way you know about them is because you're reading the books they wrote. And there's a bit of stage dressing that's possible there that wouldn't happen if you caught them on a subway car. But I wouldn't say junk your education completely. I'm hoping that it gave you some positives. But that's never called to, I mean, it's not your education, the education that you get in college on history or whatever, it's not just this block thing like a solenoid battery that just stays the same. You constantly have to be adding to it. Education is very much a verb. So I wouldn't say that the education that you got in history is worthless. I would say just keep working at it. And don't be so hard on yourself. Anastasia B says, Dear Steve and Frida, congratulations on 13K. Frida isn't up on her window. She's directly next to me here. Could it be that by denying the possibility of a next milestone, you are challenging your viewers to prove you wrong? My question was asked many times before, but still, I wonder what you think about, for example, counting numbers while practicing no sub-vocalizing when reading. Or is complete silence better? I've never heard anyone suggest that. What would be the point? What would be the point of sub-vocalizing anything at all? If you're trying to stop yourself from doing it, counting numbers? I don't think I've ever heard that suggested. What would be the point of doing that? You're substituting something for something else. Why not just get rid of the category? It will take time. It will take time. It took you 10 years to learn how to sub-vocalize and to do it naturally as a reflex and pay attention while you were doing it. 10 years. Your first 10 years, but still, a long time. It will take you a long time to unlearn that habit. Just silence, I would say, I would advise. Andrew Russell says, Hi, Steve. Following on from a recent Q&A, I recently produced a one-act play and thoroughly enjoyed the experience. What is a contemporary playwright or play that really impressed you? I don't keep up with modern drama the way I should, or modern dramatists. I was largely scared off it in the late 80s, early 90s, and I haven't gone back to look. So there isn't a name that comes to mind. Bobby Joe says, so glad your channel is expanding its audience. Congratulations. I'm not sure that I'm glad about that. Well, happy to see all of you. Here in the South, there are people in Charleston, South Carolina that are highly esteemed due to their descent from British aristocracy. Their ancestors came here during the English rule of this land. Does this lineage really mean anything? No, of course not. And is probably fictitious. If so, do you have any royal connections or any favorite authors that are descended from royalty? Oh, I have a couple of authors I really like who are royalty. I am not descended from royalty, no. I'm pretty sure that no matter how far back you trace the Donoghues, the Hickeys, the Powers, and the Leahys, you will not find any royalty. Luca McCann says, Hi, Steve, big fan of the channel. Why, thank you. Aren't you nice? How did you first get into book reviewing? I'd love to hear the process of your first ARC, etc. Also, as someone from Ireland, where thrift stores aren't as much of a thing, what's the best bargain you found in one of those, as I've always wanted to live in America, sheerly for the book bargains, lol. Okay. Well, almost lost coherent English there, but we managed to hold on just by our fingertips. I got into book reviewing because I was writing fiery op-eds. In the opinions page of your newspaper, if you have a newspaper, this is all ancient talk. Once upon a time, there were signed, big editorials, but there was also a stack of little op-eds on the side. They were never credited. It was sort of the newspaper weighing in on little items of the day. Often, I would write all three of those myself every day, weighing in on the politics of the era and of the age and of the region. And I was in the newsroom all the time. And the arts editor, the arts entertainment editor, a dear, sweet, harried old man, decided, why don't you write a book review for me? He was always hungry for content. And we talked books all the time. He had a stack of review copies right there on his desk. So I took one and reviewed it. Loved the experience and kept doing it. But you had other questions, right? The best bargain you found in a thrift store. I don't really think about that at all. I don't keep in mind what someone elsewhere would pay for a book when I find it myself. Once upon a time, I used to go to a huge Goodwill or a big charity shop in the Northeast here. And this huge Goodwill, next door to it, they had a processing warehouse. Customers could still go in, but nothing was organized. Instead, everything was just in great heaping piles. And because of that, it was much cheaper. And for a long time, for probably 2 years, before they changed their policy, that warehouse right next door to a Goodwill that I could go to had big canvas tub bins full of books for 5 for $1, regardless of what they are. Just 5 for $1. So the person at the register is just going to count the number of books you got. And I went whole hog on that for other people and for myself. Digging, you had to literally lean on top half of your body all the way down into this bin to get to the bottom of it. And you had the dregs of humanity lining those bins. I went occasionally. It was great, great fun. I never really... I always felt guilty when I brought anybody there because it was kind of the Wild West. But one time, I went there. I would always just walk down this corridor to this huge, teeming, screaming, loud monkey house of a warehouse full of people. Oh my God. Shoes. The people who reacted to a new bin of shoes coming out. You have not seen humans act that way at all. I've been to the old Filene's basement when sales were announced, and even then, I didn't see humans behave this way. Only about shoes, not really about books. But one day, I walked down that corridor. I thought, I was stealing myself. I was saying, okay, you're going to take an hour. You're going to look at every book. You're not here to waste. You're not here to look at some of the books. This is a soiling experience, but you'll get a big sack of books when you're done, and you'll spend $5. So you're going to look at every one. I was preparing myself to dig. I rounded the corner, looked at the first bin. Not only was no one there yet, but right on top, the books were piled like that on top. And literally right on top of the pile was a mint condition, 2nd edition Riverside Shakespeare, the big brown Riverside Shakespeare, for 25 cents, for 20 cents, sitting there with no highlights in it at all, nothing, just right on top. So I grabbed it, of course. I gave that thing out as presents to everybody. I guess that would count as a great bargain. Let's see here. Where were we here? Patrick O'Toole says, "Hey, Stephen Bean, loving the rapid-fire Q&A sequence." I think it's stalling for now, right? I mean, we had 12.8, 12.9, 5K videos, 5,000 videos, and now 13K. But I don't think there'll be one for a while. Number 1, can you recommend a book on David Hume? James Harris wrote a book called David Hume, an intellectual biography or something like that. An intellectual biography of David Hume. It was very good. I'd certainly recommend that. That's recent enough. That was an academic press, I think. So that's recent enough so that a library might have it. Number 2, what was your impression of the Zen Buddhists when you were in Japan? I'm not going to knock anyone's, personal heroes here, but the number one blandishment of all religions, and please don't tell me that Buddhism is not a religion, the number one blandishment of all religions that bothers me the most, they have all of them their strengths, all of them their glories, but the one thing they all do in common is to somehow argue to their adherents that this life is an antechamber, a waiting room only, to some other greater experience, some broader experience, no matter what it is, no matter what that broader experience is. And in Buddhism, the idea that you would still yourself to complete emptiness, that you would make yourself a vessel that has nothing in it, that you would clear your mind of first conflict, then consideration, then thought at all, and be just empty stillness. As if that isn't a perfect description of hell. And the only reason you would consider that a good thing is if you thought you had forever. Otherwise, if you thought this was everything, that this was the only time you'd ever experience anything, of course, Buddhists don't think that. That's what makes it a religion. But if you thought that this was the only time that you would ever get to experience anything, the last thing you would do is hone your ability to be a mindless slate of a void. That drives me crazy, absolutely crazy. Every time I've seen a deep, heavily indoctrinated Buddhist, whether it's in Japan or in America, assiduously working hours every day to think nothing, to care about nothing, to be nowhere, to eliminate themselves. I'm always just, aren't you going to be dead fast enough that you want? I didn't have much association with them. Let's just put it that way. Oscar Mendoza says, I'm 28 and planning to return to college to get my bachelor's degree in something STEM related after having worked hard manual labor jobs for almost 7 years. How fascinating. I have heard the horror stories of the humanities in college, but I'm still curious about those classes, especially since I spent so much of my time away reading books. Any advice for tackling humanities classes and which subjects are less politicized? English, psychology, art, philosophy. If you're going to college in the United States, they're all heavily politicized, and so are the STEM classes. but the non-STEM classes, the humanities that you describe here, they are completely infiltrated, completely infested. So you ask for advice on tackling those subjects after having done 7 years of industrious reading on your own. I would say don't do it. You can't change them. And all you're going to find is noxious stuff that you just want to object to. And objecting will get you booted out of the college and blacklisted from other colleges. It will get your car bombed. It will get your dormitory raided, your windows on your dormitory or your apartment broken. And also, 5 or 6 years down the line, long after you've left that experience behind, you'll still be being found and having windows broken on your apartment. It's not worth it. The people that have infested these classes are completely psychotic ideologues. And there's no benefit to it. I guarantee you, if you have spent 7 years joyously, privately reading on your own, you're light years ahead of the people that you will find in these classes. It won't matter anyway. The classes are entirely Twitter politics. That is all that governs them, and that's all they care about. And that's all they're going to care about hearing back from you. So if you don't want to do that, and why would you, then just avoid it. There's no saving it. There are no pocket experiences here that avoid it. There are variations of how bad it is. In quite a few schools, quite a few colleges in America where you would go into a class like that, the teacher would put naked, casual 21st century bigotry openly on the table at the beginning of the session, at the beginning of the first session, and just go from there. And if you don't agree with that bigotry, or God forbid, aren't a bigot yourself, you're going to have nothing but trouble. I wouldn't do it if I were. Just avoid it. It's not salvageable. It's just best avoided. Flora Should Be Reading says, congrats, Steve. Onward to 14K. Oh, my God. 2 questions. 1, what did you think of Christopher Hitchens' short book on Mother Teresa? I found it quite good. It was quite good. Number 2, what did you think of Stefan Zweig's historical biographies? I'm considering reading his book on Magellan. They're wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. Probably better for you to think of them as novels. But even so, they're wonderful. I wish that I could find more of them. First of all, I haven't seen one in years. But I wish that there were like a uniform gift set of them, maybe with a new introduction in English. Maybe standardized covers, maybe even go whole hog and have someone freshly annotate them. That would be just wonderful. They're so delightful to read. Let's see here. AKAJK says, hey Steve, I'm a massive fan of Star Trek, the original series. I just started watching Next Gen. Whilst I'm enjoying it, I'm still getting past the bizarre nature of not seeing Shatner and Nimoy. What are your thoughts on The Next Generation? Well, I used to hate it. I used to think it was Star Trek The Boring Generation. And then I was part of Book Trek 2021 last year. it was a Booktube event where all we were doing is reading Star Trek fiction. And I read a ton of Next Generation fiction that I hadn't read before. I reread a ton that I had read. And more importantly, I think I rewatched the show. And really liked it. I was very much wrong. It's a totally different register. You're right. It is really strange not to see the original crew. And also, the priorities of the show are drastically different than the ones in Star Trek the original series, especially once the show got its legs underneath it and became more confident in itself. You just have to go with that. You just have to flow with that and get used to the fact that it's not that not only the cast is different, but the sentiment is different. But you had another question, right? I'm also a basketball fan and was wondering if you like the Boston Celtics. Well, you picked a melancholy day to ask that question. I did, once upon a time, like the Boston Celtics, and a big reason why died today. Bill Russell died today. But I haven't followed him forever. But once upon a time, yes. Joel Swagman says, this is going back a couple of years in the history of your channel, but I was intrigued by your video on the Civil Wars by Appian. It got me wondering, what other surviving works of ancient literature are not all that great? Well, I would say most of Cicero, especially his cod philosophizing, and everything by Julius Caesar. I don't see the appeal of either one. The letters of Cicero, sure, and maybe some of his court speeches, his prepared court speeches, but his books on philosophy, oh Lord. Oh, Lord. and I could go on. It's random chance that we got most of the great works of classical literature that we have. Random sampling is naturally going to give you a random sampling of crapola. Nasser has a barrage of questions. How are we doing for time? We're fine. Number one, I love the poetry of Thomas Hardy and Emily Bronte, both being primarily known for their novels. Who is your favorite novelist poet? Robert Graves. Number two, who are your favorite essayists, contemporary or otherwise, barring Virginia Woolf, of course? Well, who's answering these questions, Bob? You or me? You asked my favorite. That's Virginia Woolf. I had to make a runner-up. Maybe Robert Louis Stevenson would certainly be up there. Number three, being well aware of your hatred of philosophers, I would love to know your thoughts on the writings of Isaiah Berlin and John Gray. And then you helpfully tell me that they are both contemporary British philosophers. I don't like their philosophical writing at all. It's dumb. Gray is considerably dumber, but even so. Thank you. Always a pleasure to interact with you, however flimsy the premise. Well, that's very nice of you to say. Keep in mind, you can interact with me anytime you want. Voxer me. I'm online all day long. Email me. Voxer me. I'll be right there. Robert White says, I offer you sincere congrats and thank you for the channel. Thank you. What's more annoying, the lack of brevity in a question or spam questions? I'm playful with both. Is Boston on alert for monkeypox and BA5? Not as far as I know, at all, no. And I don't think we're going to see much alert for either. Because, thanks to Donald Trump, these things are now politicized. And that means that a politician running for office, making promises about what they're going to do, or having just one office and laying out a plan for what they're going to do, will not risk doing high priority warnings or, God forbid, restrictions, social restrictions. Warnings don't mean anything. You need to restrict things in order to tamp down on these are nots. And they're not going to do it because it's political now. Amazingly, disastrously, it's political now. You'll never see, for instance, a Republican state government. You'll never see a Republican state government impose any kind of mass mandates or travel mandates or movement mandates of any kind. No matter what, no matter how bad the variant is, there are horrible variants and new viruses coming down the pike that will very much need those things and won't get them. Let's see here. Blue Laser Ryan says, congrats on 13K. Number one, what would have happened, in your opinion, if Grant had been in command of the Army of the Potomac in the aftermath of Gettysburg? I think he would have destroyed Lee's army. Simple enough there, but that might have changed everything. That might have changed the calculus of the last year of the war. Number two, John Meacham has a new biography on Abraham Lincoln coming out in October called And There Was Light. Are you looking forward to it? There are two kinds of looking forward to things, right? One is eagerly anticipating. One is looking forward to it because I know it's coming. I know I will interact with it. It's more the latter for that. The the biblical title alone makes me think this will be a work of straight-up saint worship from an author who's prone to that. So that will be largely annoying. I don't know that I'll write about it. I will hope that it's an evaluative work. I don't think it. From the title, I don't think it. And number 3, what U.S. state do you think is the most beautiful? Well, I have to say Massachusetts, don't I? Don't I? Or Iowa? I could say Iowa. I can't say Oregon. I can't say Oregon. I can't do that. Massachusetts or Iowa. EV says, "Hi Steve, thank you for your videos. Number 1, I hear you like Buffy the Vampire Slayer. What's your favorite season and who's your favorite character?" My favorite character overall is Giles, but my favorite season is probably season 4. Although they're all great. Don't get me wrong. Number 2, out of curiosity, why do you think the Demon Smurf of Booktube hasn't read some of the books he talks about? Well, there are a couple of reasons. Number 1, I wasn't born yesterday. I've dealt with handsome young men who are trying to BS their way past an exam, which is essentially what he's doing. One reason would be that I don't trust a lot of what he says. It doesn't sound like he derived it himself. Which is a sort of instinct that you have to get used to when you are, for instance, grading papers, essays, that sort of thing. But more importantly than that, and running deeper than that, is that if watch a year of his videos, if you take at complete face value a year of his videos, then what you are talking about, let's say 2020, a year of his videos in 2020 or 2021, let's say 2021, a year of his videos in 2021, you get to the end of that year, then allegedly, the person you are watching in his videos in 2022 has read 300, 400, 500 books in 2021. Does the person you're watching in his videos in 2022 seem like the kind of person who has read 500 books the previous year? No. No. The person in those videos, this is Jack Edwards we're talking about for those of you who don't know, the person in those videos, whether it's 2022's latest video, or something from 2021, or something from 2022, seems exactly the same. Well, I know who I'm talking to. I'm talking to an audience of genuine, addicted, dedicated book readers. You know as well as I do. Reading changes you. That's the reason we do it. Reading changes you. It's easy to tell a person who has done 500, who has read 500 books deeply and carefully in the previous year. It's easy to spot that. Just as it's easy to spot someone who hasn't done that at all. Leaving aside the third reason, which is just use your imagination. You don't have to take my word for it at all. Just use your imagination. Click on his latest video, mute the video, and just watch him smiling and jump cutting and anticing around, and ask yourself, or don't mute the video, that's not fair to him. Watch the video and ask yourself, can you, in your wildest imagination, picture the person in that video sitting down and silently reading a book instead of scrolling on their phone, or talking to people, or texting people, or sexting people? Can you picture, in your strained imagination, that person sitting down and reading a single book, let alone 600 books, all of them canonical classics? No, you cannot picture that. It's utterly ridiculous to think. But anyway, we don't want to end on that note, though. You have a third question. Okay, we'll end on your third question. Number 3, what are some non-obvious ways that a close friendship with a dog is different from one with a human? What a great question. I don't know what you would consider obvious and non-obvious. I've mentioned many times before, dogs can't posit things into the future in the way that humans can. A little bit of pattern recognition, but humans can live in the future, and often do. Humans often do, much to their detriment, much to their ill health. Humans can live in the future. They can extrapolate amazingly detailed scenarios all the way out a week, a month, a year, and dogs can't do that. Absolutely, that's just not there at all. And spending time with them, being friends with them, having no language barrier, so to speak, with them, puts you in contact with that world, which is tremendously rejuvenating. It's like taking a deep sauna bath of your brain. It's great that way. Also, they don't tend to hold grudges at all. They don't tend to be traumatized. They don't tend to hold on to their trauma. A lot of humans love to do that. They get a trauma and they like to hold on to it and sort of caress it instead of letting it go or letting it work itself out. Dogs don't tend to do that. Healthy, I guess, is the non, but that might be an obvious answer. Let's wrap that up and move on to part 2.